LA Knight Bloodline Twist. WWE Backstage Shock. Bloodline War Update. LA Knight Wildcard. Raw's secret revealed. What if everything we thought we knew about the Bloodline Civil War was only half the story? And what if LA Knight, of all people, is quietly standing at the center of something WWE hasn't fully shown us yet? Because here's the real question nobody can stop asking right now: is LA Knight just a loudmouth catching attention, or is he about to walk straight into one of the most dangerous family wars WWE has ever told? Now look, I know how this sounds at first. You hear LA Knight and Bloodline Civil War in the same sentence and your brain kind of goes, yeah, that doesn't fit. But WWE has a habit of doing exactly that. The thing that feels wrong on paper? That's usually the thing they end up leaning into the hardest on screen. And the moment this rumor started floating around Raw backstage chatter, fans immediately split into two camps. One side is laughing it off like it's impossible. The other side is already trying to map out how it would actually work. And honestly, both sides might be missing the bigger picture. Because this isn't just about LA Knight randomly getting inserted into a storyline. It's about timing. It's about chaos. And most importantly, it's about what WWE is trying to do with the Bloodline story now that everything has basically exploded into multiple directions. Let's slow this down for a second. The Bloodline Civil War is already messy. You've got fractured alliances, shifting loyalties, and a whole situation where nobody fully trusts anybody anymore. Roman Reigns is still the name that hangs over everything like a shadow, even when he's not physically in the ring. And then you've got the rest of the family trying to redefine themselves without fully stepping out of his influence. Now normally, in a situation like this, WWE keeps the focus tight. Family versus family. Internal betrayal. Power struggle. Simple structure, complicated emotions. But then LA Knight shows up in the conversation like a wildcard nobody asked for, and suddenly things don't feel so simple anymore. And if you've been watching LA Knight closely over the past months, you already know something interesting has been happening with him. It's not just the catchphrases anymore. It's not just the crowd reactions. There's this growing sense that WWE is slowly, almost quietly, positioning him in places where he doesn't technically belong, but somehow still fits. You notice it in backstage segments. You notice it in how he reacts to bigger names. You notice it in how commentators sometimes casually mention him in the same breath as main event level players, even when the storyline doesn't fully demand it yet. And that's where the rumor starts to feel a little less like fantasy. Because according to backstage whispers from Raw, there's been some internal discussion about expanding the Bloodline Civil War narrative beyond just family members. Not replacing the core story, but adding external pressure points. People who aren't in the family, but get pulled in because of opportunity, ego, and timing. And LA Knight? He fits that opportunity meets ego category a little too perfectly. Let's be honest for a second. If there is one thing LA Knight never does, it's ignore an opportunity to step into chaos and make it about himself. The man treats attention like oxygen. If there's a fire, he's not running away from it. He's walking into it, adjusting his jacket, and saying something like, "Let me talk to you," before everything explodes. So imagine that personality dropped into the middle of a Bloodline Civil War. You don't even need WWE to overcomplicate it. It writes itself. But here's where things get interesting, because this isn't necessarily about him joining a side. At least not in the traditional sense. Backstage talk suggests something a little more unpredictable. The idea isn't LA Knight becoming Bloodline. It's LA Knight becoming a disruption. And that word matters. Because the Bloodline story has always been about control. Control of legacy, control of power, control of narrative. Roman Reigns built his entire era around controlling everything in his orbit. Even when things fall apart, they fall apart in a way that still somehow centers him. Now introduce someone like LA Knight into that structure. Someone who doesn't care about family legacy. Someone who doesn't respect the internal rules of the story. Someone who walks in and immediately starts speaking like he's already the main character. That doesn't stabilize a storyline. That destabilizes it. And maybe that's exactly the point WWE is exploring right now. Because think about it, what happens when the bloodline stops being a closed system? What happens when outsiders start influencing outcomes? It stops being a family war and starts becoming something bigger, messier, and more unpredictable. Now I can already hear some fans saying, "Nah, this is overthinking it. LA Knight is just doing his own thing." And sure, that's the safe assumption. WWE loves giving hot stars independent momentum. But Raw Backstage reports hint at something more deliberate. There's been conversation about cross-story tension points, where LA Knight doesn't necessarily align with the bloodline, but keeps crossing paths with them at the worst possible times. And you know how wrestling works. Once you cross paths enough times, it stops being coincidence. It becomes storyline. And let's not ignore the crowd reaction factor here, because this part actually matters a lot more than people admit. LA Knight is one of those rare cases where the audience basically forces WWE's hand. The reactions are not "we like this guy." The reactions are, "this guy is already a big deal whether you planned it or not." And WWE has historically responded to that kind of energy in one of two ways: either they cool it down, or they build something massive around it. Right now, it feels like they're testing the second option. Now imagine this scenario playing out step by step. The Bloodline Civil War is escalating. Alliances are breaking. Matches are getting more personal. Then LA Knight starts inserting himself into key moments, not as a savior, not as a villain, but as someone chasing opportunity in the middle of chaos. Maybe he costs someone a match. Maybe he interrupts a celebration. Maybe he just shows up at the exact wrong time with the exact right attitude and ruins everything. And suddenly, the bloodline isn't just fighting each other anymore. They're also dealing with him. And that changes the emotional structure of the story. Because now it's not just internal betrayal. It's external disrespect. It's someone stepping into their war and treating it like entertainment. And if there's one thing that would absolutely irritate every member of the bloodline storyline, it's someone treating their legacy like a spotlight to steal. Now let's talk about Roman Reigns for a second, because even though he's not always physically present, his influence is everywhere in this discussion. Roman's character is built on hierarchy, on respect, on acknowledgement, on control of the room the moment he walks in. LA Knight is almost the opposite energy. He doesn't ask for acknowledgement in a serious way. He demands attention through charisma, volume, and pure crowd manipulation. It's not quiet dominance. It's loud survival. And those two energies colliding? That's money. That's the kind of contrast WWE loves when they want to create long-term tension without even putting two people in a ring right away. But here's the thing that makes this rumor even more fun to talk about: nobody is saying this is a full-time alliance or official membership. It's more like a slow bleed.